The single biggest problem I have with the education system, and it's 2021 and I can't believe this is still happening, is that money is not taught in schools. We're taught about algebra, we're taught about trigonometry, about Shakespeare, we're taught about the different types of rock, yet we're not taught about the very thing that keeps this whole world, this whole economy as we know it running. And it's so integral in our everyday lives. It's so important that the majority of us are going to spend most of our lives working more than 8 hours a day just to get more of it. And I was watching a lecture given by Tom Ferry, who is an educator in real estate, and he brought up the 5-15-80 rule. And it suggests that 5% of the planet has created what is called generational wealth. So they save, they invest, and they figured out ways to pass that wealth onto their kids or their grandkids. And they teach their children the value of that money so it doesn't get squandered. This generation wealth starts at about $5 million and it goes up into billions. And the next is the 15%, and they are the middle class. And they have some savings, they go on nice holidays, and they can afford to buy nice things. They're not super wealthy, but they're comfortable. They took the time to learn the value of money, and they're smart enough and honest enough to know that they need money for their security and their well-being. And the final group are the 80%. And the people in this group, when they get older, they either have to work an everyday job to make money to survive, or they are dependent on the government or their family to subsidize their lifestyle. So if you self-reflect for a second and think about yourself based upon your own money behaviors and your own money psychology, where do you think you are going to be in 10 or 20 years time? Will you be in the 5%, 15% or 80%? Let me know in the comments below, because the purpose of this video is at least to go in some way to help fill in that gap that the education system has missed in spreading and having an open conversation about money. Lesson number 1, live with intention. We live in a world where we're all victims of consumerism. Everywhere we look, we're bombarded with companies sending us messages to buy their goods or services. And as a result, most of us just have too much stuff. If you look around you now, you probably have things you've bought or things other people have bought that are just lying there and are never getting used. And that's where minimalism comes in. Being a minimalist is essentially where you own fewer possessions. It's where you live more intentionally with only the things that you really need that help you support your purpose and goals. So excess possessions that act as distractions are removed so you can focus more on those things that matter the most. And I started living minimally about 7 years ago, completely by accident. I was traveling around Southeast Asia at the time with just a backpack, and so naturally I had to cut down the number of things that I brought with me. But I realized how freer I was and how much happier I was having fewer things. That actually made me happier. So to this day, my apartment is relatively empty. I don't own a lot of things. Everything I buy, before I buy it, I make sure that it will actually improve my life in some way. It stops me from just buying things in the spur of the moment and accumulating junk that just ends up lying around the apartment. And in those 7 years of living minimally, I must have saved thousands from things that I would have bought, but then realized they're not going to make me happy, so I ended up not buying them. Lesson number 2. Pay yourself first. And there's a book called The Richest Man in Babylon, one of my favourite books that I definitely recommend because it's so different from most other finance books. It was written in 1926, but it was set 4,000 years ago in ancient Babylon. And it's interesting that even though the book was written through a collection of parables set 4,000 years ago, the financial advice is still relevant today. And I actually made a more detailed review of The Richest Man in Babylon and the really quite powerful lessons I learned from it in a video I posted last week. You can click on the pop-up banner above to watch it. And the book advises on saving 10% of your annual income to start building up your wealth. For every 10 coins thou placest within thy purse, take out of thy but 9. Thy purse will start to fatten at once, and its increasing weight will feel in thy hand and bring satisfaction to thy soul. So it basically advises a 10% savings rule, which is a guideline of how much your gross income you should set aside for retirement. And it's about as simple as an equation gets, right? So as soon as you receive your paycheck, you take 10% and you put it aside. However, it isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. The less you earn, the more difficult it can be to save, especially if you're trying to set aside 10% of your gross pay. So people on lower incomes might want to start with 3% or 4% or 5%, but the idea is to prioritize your savings and invest consistently to allow for that money to make more money. Which leads us on to lesson number 3. Put your money to work. You might think that investing 10% every paycheck isn't going to leave you with that much money come retirement, but you also need to take into account the magic of compound interest. Let me explain. According to Goldman Sachs, the average stock market return for 10 years is 9.2%. So let's say minus 1% management fees, and taking into account 2% inflation, you're earning on average, let's say 6.2% interest a year on your investments. So let's say at 20 years old, you have an investment of £1,000 in the stock market, earning 6.2% interest per year. And for the next 30 years, you put aside $500 every single month. So every single month for 30 years, you put aside $500. By the time you're 50 years old, you'll have $514,000. And of that $514,000, $333,000 was earned passively through interest. So that's about 65% of the $514 you now have is free money. And that's how powerful compound interest can be, as long as you start early, and that's really important, as long as you start early. It's about timing the markets, not timing the markets, and your money can quickly snowball and start increasing exponentially. And essentially, that's how the rich keep getting richer, because once you have money, it's far easier to then make more money on top of that. Lesson number 4, be aware of lifestyle inflation. So when we're fresh out of college and we've got our first paycheck, it's very likely that we'll just blow it straight away. And as our income increases, our aspirations and our expectations rise with it. So lifestyle inflation happens when your expenses increase along with your income. As earnings increase, it's natural to want to move to a bigger apartment or go on another holiday. But if the money that you're saving or investing isn't keeping up with your rising expenses, then you could actually find yourself with less money than before your increase in income. And I'm sure we've all been in a position where we've been spending more than we've been earning. It's how millionaires and even celebrities can still find themselves wrapped up in huge debt. If lifestyle inflation has increased more than earnings, then debt is often the result. So someone might get a pay rise and decide to get a mortgage for a bigger house, but the monthly payments will also increase, possibly leaving them with the same or even less money than before their pay rise. And although lifestyle inflation is not always a bad thing, just do make sure you're aware of it. Lesson number 5, invest in yourself. Investing in yourself is one of the best returns of investments you can make, because once you've invested in yourself, that's it, you've got it forever.
By far the best investment you can make is in yourself. It's just hugely important. And if you invest in yourself, nobody can take it away from you.
And it's probably easier than you think. Just something as simple as reading books and becoming more knowledgeable, right? It's something so simple, so you can make better decisions and achieve more things in the future. That's an investment. Exercising regularly to stay fit and healthy to increase the likelihood of you being able to achieve your dreams. The hours of studying you do for that exam is an investment, because the more you study, the more you learn, the better your grades will be when you graduate, and the more opportunities you will have in the future. It's something that I've been working on over the last 4 or 5 years, actually allocating more of my money towards things that will help me grow. Things like personal trainers at the gym, books, online courses, and attending events and conferences. And in the same 4 or 5 years, I've grown and developed so much as a person, and I definitely wouldn't be where I am now without actually putting money back into myself to grow further. In the same way you would finance a business, you need to invest money back into that business, right, to nurture it and to allow it to grow and expand. And you should be doing that with yourself too. Lesson number 6, record what you spend. So management consultant and author Peter Drucker is often quoted as saying, you can't manage what you can't measure, meaning that you can't know whether or not you are successful unless success is defined and tracked. So if you can't measure what you're spending your money on, then you can't improve it. And I've recorded my income and expenses for as long as I can remember, and I still do it to this day. Here you can see my income and expenses more than 7 years ago, back in 2013 and 2014, before I even studied at university. And as you can see, even back then I had a budget specifically for personal development, and it was a good way of keeping track of what I was spending, but also what I was earning too, and how much money I had left at the end of the month. And I have to track revenue and expenses for the business anyway, so now it's just a habit to keep track of my personal expenses too. Habit number 7. Money does not equal happiness. Now, money can be used as a tool to help you achieve happiness, but it's certainly not a direct positive correlation. There are plenty of depressed millionaires and billionaires out there. In fact, there have been some studies that show that excessive wealth can actually become a burden and decrease your happiness. A 2018 study from Purdue University used data from the Gallup World Poll, which is the most comprehensive and furthest reaching survey in the world, surveying 1.7 million people. And the researchers found the happiness of an individual did increase with money up until their income reached $95,000. And at $105,000, their happiness levels actually started to decrease. Brad Klontz, a financial therapist and psychology professor at Creighton University, said, once you hit that middle class level, there really is no correlation above that. At the end of the day, we're humans and we struggle with existential issues like what's the meaning of life? And those sort of questions don't go away when you get a bunch of money. So more money doesn't make us happier, but making more money relative to the people around us does. And this is because we have an evolutionary tendency to compare ourselves with others. It's a psychological phenomenon called hedonic adaptation, where over time we get used to the increase in money and the upgrade in our lifestyles, and our happiness goes back to its base level. Money is something that in the education system is just not talked about enough, it's not taught enough. And so I'm really looking at expanding the content and topics on this channel to really just provide as much value as I possibly can. And speaking of adding value, last week I made a video on how I turned my 1.3 GPA into a 4.0 GPA while at university, and I also made a video on how I trained myself to be able to study for 14 hours a day relatively easily. You can click on the videos on the screen, and as always, let me know in the comments what you thought of this video, whether you like the more focused study advice videos, or if you'd like me to branch out more into other topics as well, such as money management like this video, investing, day in the life videos, book recommendations, that kind of thing. So let me know in the comments and I'll try to reply to as many of you as I can.